There is a curious habit among modern men of imagining that morality is a matter of multiplying rules, when in truth it is a matter of exposing a few simple lies. Evil is rarely ingenious, it is generally monotonous. The devil has never shown much originality. He merely repeats the same old tune upon increasingly expensive instruments. If one were compelled to reduce the principal moral mistakes of our age to three, which one can easily do with only minimal effort, one might say they are these. First, imagining one ought to possess everything one desires. This first error begins with a confusion as old as Eden. Desire is a magnificent servant and a catastrophic master. We were given appetites as windows, not as chains. A hungry man is meant to seek bread, not to conclude that whatever he hungers after is therefore his by right. Yet our civilization has quietly adopted the extraordinary doctrine that every longing constitutes a claim upon the universe. If a thing is wanted intensely enough, it is assumed that it ought to be had. This is not merely false, it is absurd. A child may desire 6 cakes, a palace, and the moon before bedtime. No sensible parent imagines that the intensity of the child's wishes establishes the justice of them. The very education of a human being consists in discovering that desire is only the beginning of wisdom and never its conclusion. The parent who indulges the child's every fantasy is frowned upon, not because he loves the child, but precisely because he has failed to teach the child that he does not need to pick the wildflower in order to enjoy them, that he can return to the field of sunflowers over and over again if he leaves the helianthus where it is, and more to the point, that countless other wandering children would also find therapy in its beauty. That is the very beauty of a nature walk, that one cannot take the breathtaking beauty of the rolling sea, the majestic forest, or the expansive valley home with one. One must leave at some point, tear himself away from this beauty, or suffer the fate of Narcissus. Peter is brought down to earth, as it were, after witnessing the transfiguration of Jesus on Mount Tabor. Indeed, one of the deepest pleasures known to man is the pleasure of admiring what he cannot own. The mountain is more majestic because it belongs to no one. The stars are more beautiful because they cannot be purchased. Even friendships depend upon the glorious impossibility of possession. The man who seeks to own everything eventually discovers that he loves nothing at all, for possession has replaced appreciation. It seeks to imprison beauty, whose very beauty stems from being free. The flower in the vase bears no resemblance to the helianthus in the field. Art tries to capture this free beauty, and the great artists come close to this purpose. Art does not seek to imprison the flower, it seeks only to truly represent it to the world along with the artist's joy and wonder. The second error is this, that he prefers to live through the triumphs of other men rather than through the desires of his own life. This second error is stranger still. It is the temptation to live by proxy. There have always been heroes, and thank heaven for them. There have always been champions, explorers, poets, and saints, whose deeds enlarged the imagination of mankind and gave us hope. But admiration becomes idolatry when a man ceases merely to applaud greatness and instead borrows it as a substitute for his own existence. One sees multitudes who can recount with astonishing precision the achievements of athletes they have never met or actors who would not recognize them if they passed in the street. They rejoice in victories won by stronger arms than their own and grieve over defeats suffered by strangers, while neglecting the infinitely more difficult contest of governing their own tempers, loving their own families, or serving their own neighbors. The tragedy is not that games exist. Games are splendid things precisely because they are games, and by definition, not to be taken too seriously. A football match may refresh the spirit as a holiday refreshes the body. The tragedy begins when the holiday becomes the occupation and the spectator mistakes observation for participation. There is no shame in cheering a great cricketer or admiring a fine actor. The shame lies in allowing another man's achievements to replace one's own vocation. A civilization cannot be built entirely of spectate. Somebody must still plant gardens, mend roofs, teach children, comfort the sick, forgive enemies, and say prayers. The unnoticed duties of ordinary men and women have always held up the world, while the celebrated men and women merely decorate it. We create idols and celebrities with remarkable fecundity and then worship them as God. One can hear the fan in a soccer game proudly exclaiming, "We have outplayed them." The fan uses the collective noun we as he inserts himself into the winning team. He feels the exuberance of every victory and the depression of every defeat, as much as and often more than the players. Sometimes these two first errors are combined, as in pornography, where the spectator watches and participates vicariously, pretending he is in the scene and possessing the attributes of the part he identifies with. This is the true danger of pornography. And because it is usually a private matter and the spectator is so completely drawn into the act, it is almost impossible to objectively see its danger. The final error is perhaps the darkest because it disguises itself as righteousness. Many people cannot feel alive unless they have discovered a villain. They require an enemy as other men require breakfast. Their identities are constructed negatively, defined not by what they love, but by what they oppose. There is an intoxicating pleasure in indignation. It simplifies the universe into melodrama. One's own side becomes the company of saints, while the opposing side conveniently occupies the role of demons. The complexity of humanity disappears beneath the delicious certainty of denunciation. A current example is the state of Israel, which considers its any neighbor that has sufficient military capacity to be its enemy. It does not matter if this country, this neighbor, has ever indicated any intent to attack. For Israel, intention is assumed once significant strength is achieved. Yet hatred is a poor architect. It may demolish a house, but it has never designed one. A nation cannot be held together forever merely by fearing another nation. A church cannot flourish merely by condemning heresies. And a family cannot endure merely by sharing a common dislike. Every enduring society is built ultimately upon shared loves rather than shared enemies. Even when evil must be resisted, and it often must, the object is always the protection of something good. A soldier fights because he loves his home more than he hates the invader. A judge punishes because he values justice more than vengeance. The moment hatred becomes the highest principle, it devours the cause it originally claimed to defend. These three errors are, in truth, one error viewed from different directions. The first worships appetite, the second worships reflected glory, and the third worships resentment. In each case, the self has become strangely enlarged and strangely diminished at the same time. It grows enormously in its demands, but pitifully small in its vision. Against the lust to possess everything stands gratitude, which rejoices in gifts whether owned or not. Against vicarious living stands vocation, the cheerful acceptance that one's own small task may be more important than another man's spectacular triumph. Against the addiction to enemies stand charity, which fights evil without surrendering to hatred. The modern world continually promises enlargement through acquisition, excitement through spectatorship, and purpose through hostility. But these promises resemble those enchanted feasts of fairy tales, where every delicious fruit turns to ashes upon the tongue. The paradox of morality is that the man who renounces the tyranny of his desires becomes freer than the man who indulges them. The man who attends faithfully to his own life enjoys more genuine adventures than the man who spends his days watching others. And the man who refuses to define himself by hatred finds that he possesses more courage, not less. For the soul was not made to own everything, nor to borrow another life, nor to sharpen itself forever against an enemy. It was made to delight in what is given, to perform what is appointed, and to love what is good. Every other ambition, however loudly advertised, ends by making a prison of the very heart it promised to liberate.